Hi, welcome to our webcast of January 22, 2016.
Hello.
This is Amy Asbrook, the director of Toujours Vivant, and I'm your host, Christian Debré. So, this is Toujours Vivant is a non-religious organization by and for people with disabilities and our allies. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminates against people with disabilities. So, today's topics, we have three. The first is the Supreme Court extend the deadline of assisted suicide by 4 months. The second subject is the federal expert panel's reports is released. And the third one is the Special Joint Parliamentary Committee on Physician-Assisted Suicide death, get to work. So I give the voice to Amy Asbrook.
Thanks. Okay, our first topic is the Supreme Court extends the deadline for assisted suicide by 4 months. In a decision handed down last Friday afternoon, just after our program, the Supreme Court of Canada granted a 4-month extension on the effective date of the Carter judgment. That means that the provisions of the Federal Criminal Code that prohibit assisted suicide are still in effect until June 6th. And I was going to say something about that. Now I forgot. They had asked for 6 months, but they only got 4 months.
Yes, and the other thing is Mr. Sabah and Lisa may have another argument to win their case, which they don't have, because a law could be valuable over 8 months, more than over 2 or 3 months.
Yeah. Well, it's a little confusing because later we'll talk about that the Quebec law is still in effect as well.
Yes.
On June 6th, if the Parliament has not acted, any competent adult with a, quote, irremediable medical condition that causes enduring suffering that is intolerable to the person in the circumstances of his or her condition, unquote, can get help from a doctor to die.
Yeah.
So that's what it says in the law.
Yeah, but which intolerable suffering and what is the level?
Right.
What is the kind of? It is intolerable. Is it intolerable for the people itself,
right,
or from a point of view of medical expertise, or so on and so on? Have to be defined.
Right, exactly. It's up to Parliament between now and June 6th to define the terms that are used in the law, or in the ruling, I should say, decide who is eligible, and describe the conditions that must be met before a person can be helped to die. So the terms that need to be defined are irremediable and intolerable and suffering. All those terms need to be defined by Parliament.
Yes, because there are many value on each of it, and there is which people take the decision. There's many things to look at.
Right. Also, the question of what's irremediable, does that mean it can't be cured, or does that mean it can't be treated? Those are very different things, but those are both possibilities. So those things need to be decided, and that's up to Parliament to do that. The court said that the Quebec law can continue in effect until the new federal law is passed, so that it will keep going in effect. It came into effect last month. The court also said that this should not be taken as an endorsement of the Quebec law. Once the federal law is written, any conflicts between the federal law and the Quebec law will have to be ironed out.
Just remember, this is a constitutional debate.
Right. It's a debate as to who has the supremacy in this question. Quebec says it has supremacy because it's a health service. It's a form of medical care. The federal government says that it's because it's a criminal law that it has supremacy, so they're going to have to work it out between them.
Yeah, and you have to remember, since many years, people who was not born or not
Too young to remember.
That nobody want to touch the Constitution even with a 10-foot pole.
Right, exactly. That can get pretty messy.
Yeah.
The court also allowed that anyone who wants assisted suicide or euthanasia before June 6th can get an exemption from a judge. So a person could go to a judge and say, I want assisted suicide, and the judge can say yes or no, that person can have it. And what we thought is that, if the person can go before a judge between now and June 6th, why can't they go before a judge afterwards?
Yeah, they could do it for 6 months and they have no trouble. And they tell us that it is for very, very few number of people. So if it is possible to do it for 6 months, maybe it is possible to do for a long period of time, or for make it in the law.
Right.
And the judge is a person who is supposed to be neutral and impartial. So it could be a very nice solution to decide if a people is able to take a decision to be killed.
Right. It's one kind of protection, one kind of safeguard that could be added to the law. And the people who are pushing assisted suicide say, no, 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 it's too much of a burden for people who want assisted suicide.
But it worked now, right now.
Right. But the Supreme Court is saying that, people can go before a judge. So that should be part of the law. At least that's what we feel. It should be a protection that's added to the law.
Yeah, it could be a very good protection.
Right. So that's the end of that item. Our next item is that the Federal Expert Panel's report is finally released. The Federal Expert Panel's report was finally published on January 18th. Though the panel turned in the report by the December 15th deadline, the Liberal government took a month to release the 461-page document.
It's a little bit long.
Yeah, they shouldn't have. Even if there were translation issues, because it's a fairly long document, it shouldn't have taken a whole month.
Yeah, they succeed to do it for the budget within a few hours, and we could not do it for a text like that.
Right.
Kind
of wonder about that. Right. The federal panel included Dr. Harvey Chochinov, an expert in palliative care, Dr. Catherine Frazee, a person with a disability, retired professor at Ryerson University and former Human Rights Commissioner for Ontario, and Benoit Pelletier, an expert in constitutional law and professor at the University of Ottawa.
And so 2 of the 3 are very good experts on the subject.
Right.
The kind of people who have there's a hands-on. And the third one is the specialist over Constitution, which may be a good idea to add it because it could cause a good fight between the provinces and the federal government.
Right. So unlike the provincial expert panel, which was made up largely of bioethicists and academics who don't necessarily have direct experience with this, Dr. Chochinov, who's a palliative care doctor, and Catherine Frazee, who lives as a person with a disability and so understands this from firsthand experience, had very direct knowledge of the issue as well as academic credentials and that sort of thing. So they were very well qualified to serve on this panel. Unfortunately, the panel's mandate was changed in November so that instead of issuing recommendations to guide Parliament in writing a law to regulate assisted suicide, the panel was simply charged to summarize the input it received. So it did receive lots of information, but instead of making recommendations on that information, it just had to say, well, this group said this and that group said that, and We're not saying
it is a loss because direction or could be a very good help to people who doesn't have any knowledge about the subject, which are RMBs.
Right, exactly. Over the course of their work, the panel had held meetings with 73 individual experts in Canada, the United States, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Switzerland from the 20th of October to the 6th of November of 2015. The panel consulted directly with 92 representatives of interveners, medical authorities, and stakeholders from 46 Canadian organizations. In addition, the panel received and considered 321 written submissions from civil society organizations, academics, and individual citizens. So that's a lot of information from a lot of different perspectives.
Big bunch, yeah.
They definitely collected a lot of information. To solicit opinions online, the panel posted a questionnaire on its website from August 20th to November 23rd, 2015. In total, 14,949 individuals completed the questionnaire. The total figure included a representative sample of 2,066 Canadians.
So it's a very good poll to work with.
It's a very good poll, except for the one thing that it's only people who use computers. And so that leaves out a lot of elderly people, it leaves out a lot of poor people. And that's kind of, it gives you a little skewed result. It's not completely representative.
Yeah.
But they were able to take a representative sample from that and get some pretty interesting results from that. Participants in the online survey expressed high levels of support for a bunch of things. One is a national oversight body for physician-assisted dying, and that was 70% of the people supported.
It's quite high.
That is very high. A national strategy on palliative and end-of-life care, and that was 76% of the people supported that.
Even higher.
Right, and exactly. And we need to keep in mind that the Carter decision, the Supreme Court said that assisted dying is
guaranteed. It's a right. It's guaranteed. But
palliative care is not.
Palliative care.
Right.
Which is a little bit bizarre. You have the right to be killed, but not to be a cure of any kind. Or to take care. Nobody has you don't have the right to be care.
Pain relief.
Yeah.
And so but this is 76% of the people saying that Canada needs a comprehensive strategy on palliative and end-of-life care. Also, people talked about a comprehensive national home care strategy, and that was 78% of people supported that.
Very, very high.
Right, exactly. Home care strategy means that people don't have to go into a hospital if they need personal care. And
so for people, the right to be kept at home when they get older is very important. It's very highly supported.
It's one of the main things that people talk about when they give their reasons for wanting assisted death is that they don't feel like they're in control. And part of that is because people are forced into institutions.
Yeah. And
another thing that participants talked about was a national strategy on disability supports. So, and 80% of the people talked about wanting that. And that again gives us an idea that people don't want folks with disabilities to have a revenue that's below the poverty line. People want to have a living revenue to a living income.
Yeah, at least higher than that beneficiary of
welfare.
Welfare, okay. And if
it doesn't have to be higher. It just has to be above the poverty line.
Yeah,
so that people aren't suffering because of lack of income.
Yeah, we doesn't have to discriminate people who receive welfare. But I think it's sure that everybody have to be over the poverty line, okay. But if it's not possible, at least people who are disabled, who was productive in their life, earn the right to be to have a reasonable revenue,
Right.
which is not taken care now.
Right, but again, if it's a question of how many F-35s we're gonna buy, maybe we could buy a few less.
Yeah,
and
3 or
make sure
4
that
less,
everybody-
and we may be able to
make sure
give
everybody
the-
has a
yeah.
decent income. And finally, a lot of people talked about wanting palliative care education for all healthcare providers, and that was 84% of people supported that. And that's important because right now when people go through medical school, they only get a few hours in training of how to relieve pain and suffering. So what they're saying is that every doctor should get training on how to relieve not just physical pain, but emotional pain and existential distress.
It seems to be very obvious, but right now it's not the case. People doesn't have received enough training on this subject.
Right, and
Doctor.
you know, it seems odd because pretty much the first symptom that anybody has that makes them go to a doctor is pain.
Yeah.
Except doctors aren't taught how to deal with pain.
And the first thing that you want is to be that somebody take care of your pain, and to be cured, it's not an emergency. You be cured a little bit later.
Yeah.
But to address the physical pain, it's now.
Right, exactly. So overall, the report was very balanced, which makes it strikingly different from the provincial expert panel report, which was not very balanced. That was the one we talked about last week that suggested that children under 18 would be euthanized. And
yeah, in this case, we doesn't have seen a slippery slope. We see a cliff arriving right now.
Right, exactly. Right. It's very unfortunate that the report didn't offer any recommendations since the committee looked at such a large body of information. And what we're hoping is that the panel members will testify before the Joint Parliamentary Committee to offer some specific suggestions based on their work.
It feels like a kind of minimum that we should do.
Right, exactly. And hopefully that the panel would accept their testimony. And I've asked one of the people on the committee if she's intending to testify, and I haven't heard back from her, so we'll see. But, so that's all for that item. The next item is the Special Joint Committee. The Special Joint Parliamentary Committee on Physician-Assisted Dying is getting to work. According to their website, the Special Joint Committee on Physician-Assisted Dying was appointed to review the report of the expert panel on options for a legislative response, and that was the one we just talked about, to the Carter versus Canada decision, and other recent relative consultation activities. That would be the provincial expert report, and studies to consult with Canadian experts and stakeholders and make recommendations on the framework of a federal response to physician-assisted dying that respects the Constitution, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the priorities of Canadians. Whew.
Wow.
That was all one sentence.
Yeah, and this is a citation.
That was a direct quote
That's
from
why
their website.
that was not our intention to make a sentence so long.
Great. We wouldn't have written that sentence.
No, not at all. Somebody who write it doesn't have a goddamn idea about communication.
Yeah, they just stuck it all in there. So basically what they have to do is look at what's already been written and talk to people and then come up with a law that doesn't violate the Constitution or the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. There, I just summarized.
Yeah. In a reasonable sentence, you summarize it.
Yeah, okay.
Quite clear.
So that's their mandate. The committee held its first meeting on January 18th and must make its report by February 26th of 2016. So that's about 5.5 weeks. That's not much.
It's very, very, very short.
Yeah, it's 38 days, so it's not even 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Not good.
Not good at all.
Especially considering how long parliamentary committees usually have to do their work, which they can go on for years and years.
Yep.
Those who want to meet with the committee had until yesterday to submit a request, and we submitted a request to meet, to speak before the committee.
But it doesn't guarantee that.
Right, exactly.
No.
Filing a request to speak does not guarantee that a person will be heard by the committee.
So we don't know if our request will be granted.
Right, we'll find that out later. The 4-month extension granted by the Supreme Court and the Special Joint Committee's 6-week timeline raises the question, how can Parliament carefully craft a regulatory scheme if they're rushing to beat the clock? That's a good question.
Yeah, a good one.
Because that's what the decision says, that they need a carefully crafted scheme, but if everybody
Carefully.
right, running, how are they gonna do that?
Run carefully.
Right. Many of the people on the committee are first-term MPs and have no knowledge of this dossier. How are they expected to gain the necessary expertise and insight over the next 4 weeks and make sound recommendations that will govern the life and death of Canadians for decades to come?
And at the same time, finding an apartment,
Right. Setting up their offices.
learning all the rules of the chamber.
Right,
so
going
on,
through
so
their
on.
orientations, all this, and even MPs who have been there for a long time who don't necessarily know the dossier and all the ins and outs of it. As I'm thinking about what I want to say to the committee, I'm thinking, gosh, I need to talk about what it's like to become disabled, because these people just don't know. They have certain ideas about becoming disabled, that it's a fate worse than death, and
Yeah, which is not the truth.
right. People need time to adjust, but once they adjust, they're usually pretty happy. But that's not the image that you get from the people who are pushing assisted suicide. So, there's some pretty basic things that we have to explain even before we get to the policy issues. So those are some things we have to talk about. So did you have any other things you want to talk about, or we'll go on to the regular information that we give at the end of the... No,
I don't think so.
Okay.
I would say yes. We apologize that our version of English version is not the same as the French one, because of the French one we have a cat video at the same time.
Oh, right. Our cat didn't show up to participate in the video.
Which we don't have to this one.
She came the last time, and she even contributed some meows to the video. So
sorry. Our version are not exactly the same in French and in English.
Right. Good point. For more, even though we're talking about creating safeguards, one thing that we know is that safeguards are not truly effective, and we know that from other jurisdictions. Yeah,
it's clear. Just think about the speed. Somebody who really drive 100 kilometers on highway and never go over.
Right. Very, no matter what the speed limit, somebody's always going over the speed limit.
This is humanity.
Right.
You have a limit, you have to go just a little bit over. It's always the case.
Right, exactly. So even though we're talking about safeguards, really, at bottom, we oppose assisted suicide. And here are some of the reasons to oppose the legalization of assisted suicide and euthanasia. First, because it's unnecessary. Everyone already has the option to commit suicide.
And we have the proof.
Right. and to refuse medical care and have palliative sedation on demand. People keep talking about my right to die, and of course they have the right to die. It's
I
called
want
suicide.
my right to have palliative care. This is a right that I asked for.
Right, right. Well, according to the decision, it's not a right, but people say, I want my right to die. Nobody can tell me when to die. And that's true, but it's called suicide.
Yeah.
And people need to take responsibility
But
for
it's
doing
not
that.
even a right. It's a kind of fact.
Death is a fact.
Because before, a few years before that, it was a crime. It's not a right. It was a crime, and decided it's not anymore a crime, but it's not encouraged, and it's not a right. It's just a fact.
Right, dying is a fact. Also, because assisted suicide and euthanasia are discriminatory, because while people without disabilities receive suicide prevention services if they express a wish to die, people with disabilities will be encouraged and assisted to kill themselves. And that, of course, is...
It's happened more often than that we think.
Right. There are studies that show that suicide prevention programs are, people with disabilities are denied
Of this kind of program.
because the assumption is that when they make a decision to kill themselves, it's a rational choice.
Yeah.
Also, choice is an illusion because the choice cannot be free as long as people with disabilities don't have the choice in where and how they live. So the choice to die isn't actually a free choice because of discrimination. And finally, the safeguards just don't work. Where these practices are legal, safeguards do not prevent people with disabilities from being wrongly killed. And there are a lot of studies on that instead of just looking at the doctor's reports, which of course are going to
It's always
make sure everything
goes
looks
good.
fine.
Yeah.
They look at the number of people who have died and how they died and show that, in fact, the safeguards don't work.
And there is a lot of difference between those two looking at the same problem.
Right. The goal of our online discussion is to give disabled people a place to talk about these issues among ourselves from our point of view, to recognize the experience and expertise that people with disabilities have in dealing with the discrimination in the medical system, and to take our place in the public debate aside from conservatives and people who are quote unquote progressive. To view our videos, to find them on YouTube, go to your favorite search engine or YouTube and put in the words euthanasia and disability, and you'll find our videos. To participate live, send your email address and I will send a link to join us live, and that link should arrive about 15 minutes before it starts. For more information on the subjects we discuss, you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/toujourvivant, not dead yet, one word. You can visit our website at tvndy.ca. You can email me at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow me on Twitter @TVNDY. Thanks very much for joining us, and thanks to Christian for helping out.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you next week. Take care.
Have a good week.
Bye.
Goodbye.